The metal shed door was standing wide open. That was the first thing I saw when I stepped outside to grab firewood. And that was when I knew something was terribly wrong, because in 35 years, Harold never once left that door open. Not in snowstorms, not in hunting season, not even the week before he died. I walked inside, and my heart dropped straight to the cold concrete. Our 1,972 Airstream Silver Nest 07 was gone. 14 years of Harold's hands, sweat, and late-night polishing vanished before sunrise. My son, Ethan, had sold it. Sold it for $4,000 so his wife could take a Caribbean cruise. But the next morning, everything shifted. A man called and said he had my Airstream. Said there was something Harold wanted me to know, something he hid long before he died. My name is Marian Whitaker, and this is how my late husband protected me from the one woman who nearly destroyed my family. Now, back to the story. The metal door on the storage barn was standing wide open. That was the first thing I saw when I stepped out onto the back porch with my mug of coffee, breath fogging in the cold Montana air. Snow crusted the pasture behind the house. The cottonwoods along the creek were black against a white sky. And that steel door, Harold's door, gaped like someone had forgotten winter existed in Red Creek. Harold never left that door open. Not once in 35 years. I set my coffee on the rail so fast some sloshed over. Pulled my jacket tighter and crossed the yard, boots crunching over the frozen ground. The padlock we always clipped through the latch hung to the side, useless. My stomach dropped. I pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The concrete floor was cold and familiar. There, in the center, was the long, dark rectangle where our Airstream had sat so long the aluminum had pressed a permanent shadow into the dust. Only now there was nothing there. Just empty space, and a faint outline of tire tracks where something heavy had been dragged away. Silver Nest, I whispered. No. For 14 years, that 1,972 Airstream Silver Nest number 07 had been Harold's second heart. He'd dragged it home as a dented wreck when Ethan was in high school. Every spare weekend since, he'd patched and polished and rewired until it gleamed. It was the trailer we took Ethan to Yellowstone in, the one we parked under the pines at Flathead, the one Harold swore we'd live in for a year after he retired. Now it was gone. My chest went tight, a hot, painful pressure under my ribs. I gripped the nearest metal shelving to steady myself and forced myself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 40 years as a hospital nurse would do that to you. You coach other people through panic so many times, you end up coaching yourself. The workbench along the back wall was exactly how Harold had left it 10 months ago when his heart finally gave up. His tools were laid out on pegboard silhouettes, marker outlines around each wrench and drill. His old shop stool sat pushed back from the bench. A faded calendar with a picture of Zion Canyon still hung crooked on the wall, stuck on the month he died. Everything was here. Everything except the Airstream. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that empty patch of concrete, feeling like someone had carved a piece out of me while I slept. Eventually, I fumbled my phone out of my pocket and hit Ethan's number. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Mom. You okay?" "Sweetheart," I said, and my voice came out thinner than I meant it to. "Where's the trailer?" Pause. "What trailer?" "Silver Nest," I said. "Your father's Airstream. It's not in the barn." Another beat of silence. "I'm pulling in now," he said. "We'll come in." We. By the time I made it back to the house, Ethan's Subaru was already in the driveway. He got out on the driver's side, shoulders hunched against the wind, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. He was 20 years older than the boy who'd gone to prom in a thrift store suit, but right then he had the same look he'd worn when he'd broken my favorite mixing bowl in middle school, guilty and braced for impact. The passenger door opened, and Aubrey slid out, one hand cradling a paper cup from the nice coffee place in town. Designer sunglasses, perfect hair, boots that weren't made for Montana mud. She paused to adjust her scarf as if we were meeting for brunch, instead of standing on my back steps with a piece of Harold missing. Inside, at the kitchen table, my coffee sat forgotten, skin forming on top. Ethan didn't sit down. He stood near the fridge, eyes on a spot somewhere over my shoulder. Aubrey settled in at the table like we were having a normal visit, set her latte down on a coaster, crossed her legs. "Mom," Ethan started. "Where is it, son?" I asked quietly. "Where's your father's Airstream?" His jaw tightened. That's what I need to talk to you about. I waited. He swallowed. I sold it. The words landed, but they didn't make sense right away. Like he'd spoken in another language, and my brain needed time to catch up. You, what? I sold it yesterday, he said, eyes dropping to the floor. A guy from Facebook Marketplace. He wired the money. It's done. My hand found the edge of the table and held on. For how much? 4,000, he said. It needed some work, Mom. That's a fair price for a trailer that old, trust me. I checked. $4,000. For a model people drove across 3 states to bid on. For something Harold had rebuilt from the frame up, logging every bolt and polish in his notebook. For a trailer that could easily fetch 90,000, maybe 150 if you found the right buyer. For what, Ethan? My voice stayed low, but I heard the strain in it. What did you need $4,000 for so badly you sold your father's legacy behind my back? Ethan rubbed his forehead. We were underwater, Mom. The cards. Stuff added up. The cruise is already booked, non-refundable. Aubrey's been working so hard on her brand, the networking on that ship. Aubrey reached over and rested her manicured hand on his arm. Marian, she said softly, with that smooth, soothing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. We really didn't want to bother you with the details. The trailer was just sitting there. Harold is gone. You never take it out. It felt stuck, you know? And Ethan didn't want you holding on to something that keeps you from moving on. I turned my eyes on her. You decided that for me. She smiled, small and pitying. You're holding so much grief in this place. Sometimes letting go of old things is healthy. Sweetheart, I said to Ethan, keeping my gaze on Aubrey. Did you sign anything? A title, a bill of sale? Yeah, he said quickly. I had Dad's paperwork in the file cabinet from when he registered it. It was all in the barn, Mom. I just used it. I still had the key. Of course he still had the key. I'd never asked for it back when he moved out. This was his home for 22 years. You don't ask your kid to hand over the past. You should have asked me, I said. He blew out a breath, frustration rising. Would you have said yes? No, I said. I would not have. He flinched. Aubrey straightened, blowing on her latte like we were talking about the weather. Well, it's done now, she said. We leave for the cruise tomorrow, and Ethan can finally stop stressing. This is good for all of us, Marian. You won't have to worry about someone breaking in to steal that thing now. This conversation, I said, still looking at my son, is between me and Ethan. I'm his wife, Aubrey said evenly. What's between you and him is between all of us. Ethan needs financial breathing room. You're alone in this big, drafty place. The trailer was an asset. We just made a practical decision. I didn't trust myself to speak. There was a roaring in my ears that did not come from the winter wind pressing at the kitchen windows. We'll send you pictures from the ship, Aubrey added, smile returning, bright and empty. You'd love it. All that ocean. Ethan shifted his weight, eyes still refusing to meet mine. We should go, he mumbled. We still have to pack. Yes, Aubrey agreed, already standing, cup back in her hand. We have an early flight. I walked them to the door on autopilot. Ethan hugged me, quick and stiff. I love you, Mom, he said into my shoulder. I held on a second longer than he did. I love you, son. Aubrey's hug was light, perfunctory. She smelled like expensive perfume and disappointment. Take care of yourself, Marian, she said. We'll talk when we get back. I watched their taillights disappear down the gravel road, red smears against the white morning, and then went back out to the empty barn. The absence of that silver shell felt like a wound. I stood in the middle of the concrete rectangle Harold had parked in for years and let myself cry until the cold seeped through my boots and up my legs and reminded me the world was still turning, whether I was ready for it or not. My name is Marian Whitaker, and this is how my late husband saved me and our son from a woman who thought she could strip us down to nothing and walk away smiling. Before I go on, would you do something for me? Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I like knowing how far these stories travel. And if you're the kind of person who believes our best chapters don't end at 50 or 60, hit subscribe to Never Too Old so you don't miss the next story. All right, back to the day the phone rang and changed everything. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the barn with its empty center, Harold's stool sitting there with no trailer behind it. Around 4 in the morning, I gave up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with Harold's old travel log open in front of me. His handwriting marched across the pages in small, neat lines. Glacier, 2004. Route 1 along the Oregon coast, 2008. Silver Nest holds heat better than we expected in Wyoming wind. Little notes, a life mapped in miles instead of years. At 7 sharp, the landline rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Habit made me pick up. Hello, this is Marian. Mrs. Whitaker? A man's voice, rough around the edges, like he'd been awake as long as I had. This is Caleb Horner, from Horner Restorations out on County Road 11. We met once at the RV show in Bozeman. Your husband introduced us. I closed my eyes, trying to place the name. A tall man in a ball cap, grease under his fingernails, laughing with Harold over polished aluminum in a bright parking lot. Yes, I said slowly. I remember. Is everything all right? He cleared his throat. I've got your Airstream, ma'am. Silver Nest number 07. It's sitting in my shop. And Harold left something in it he wanted you to have, if anything like this ever happened. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My son said he sold it, I managed. He signed the title over. He did, Caleb said. To me. For $4,000. But that rig was never mine to keep. Can you come down here this morning? Harold was very specific about that part. I looked out the window at the empty barn, the pasture, the line of cottonwoods. I'll be there in an hour. Take your time on the roads, he said. They're slick in the shade. I'll be waiting. Red Creek is small, but Montana isn't. The drive out to Horner Restorations took 45 minutes on good roads, longer with the plows still catching up from last week's storm. I pulled my old Tacoma onto the highway, hands tight on the steering wheel, the thermos of coffee rattling in the cup holder as the truck hummed up and over frozen hills. I passed the little clinic where I'd worked nights for 30 years. The diner where Harold and I ate pie on Thursdays, the sheriff's office with its single flag whipping in the wind. All the ordinary markers of a life I thought I understood. Horner Restorations sat at the edge of an industrial strip outside town. A long, low metal building with 3 tall bay doors and a faded sign with a hand-painted Airstream on it. Rows of trailers in various states of undress lined the fenced yard, silver and white and patched. Caleb was standing outside the office door when I pulled in, jacket zipped, breath clouding the air. He raised a hand as I parked and walked over to meet me. He looked older than I remembered. 60-something, lean, with gray stubble and eyes that were too bright, like somebody who'd cried recently and wasn't admitting it. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, offering his hand. Marian, right? That's right, I said, taking it. His palm was calloused and warm. Thank you for calling. He nodded once, jaw working. Let's get you inside. The office smelled like coffee, oil, and cold metal. Beyond a glass window, I could see the main shop floor lifts, tool carts, bright lights, and the rounded backs of trailers in various stages of rehab. Caleb poured me a styrofoam cup of coffee from a pot that had seen better days and set it in front of me at a small table. I should have talked to you at the funeral, he said, sitting across from me. Harold would have wanted that, but grief makes cowards of us, I guess. You knew him well? I asked. He huffed a soft laugh. Your husband kept my doors open, Marian. 20 years ago, I was about to lose this place. Had loan papers spread out on this table, second mortgage on the house, bank breathing down my neck. I'd met Harold once before at a trade show. When he heard what was going on, he drove out here, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Let me co-sign. Men in Red Creek need you fixing their rigs more than I need this cash sitting in an account." I swallowed hard. Harold had never told me that part. He put his own credit on the line. Caleb went on. I paid every dime back with interest, but that's not the kind of debt you ever feel square on. This shop, he gestured around us, exists because your husband believed in a stranger. I looked down at my coffee. He did that a lot, I said quietly. Believed in people. I have the different round. When your boy pulled in with Silver Nest on Wednesday, Caleb said. I knew that trailer as soon as I saw the dent in the left fender. Harold showed me pictures every time we ran into each other. Talked about the rewire, about the polished skin. He called it his retirement nest. My throat burned. Ethan said he needed quick cash, Caleb continued. Said 4,000 would settle some things. I asked him if he knew what he was selling. He shrugged and said, "It's just an old tin can." Mom never uses it. He met my eyes, guilt written plain across his face. I paid him the $4. I couldn't let some flipper drag it off to God knows where. But Harold made me swear, if the day ever came when someone tried to sell it without you knowing, I was to call you and show you something first. He stood up. Come on. He left you a bit of Harold-style insurance. The shop floor was bright and cold, the air full of the smells I associated with my husband: metal, grease, the faint tang of cutting oil. Caleb led me past an Airstream with its skin peeled back and a fifth wheel up on jacks until we reached the last bay. There she was. Silver Nest number 07 sat under the lights, curved sides gleaming, our old Montana plate still bolted to the back. My knees went weak. I reached out and touched the aluminum, fingers tracing a small scratch near the door where Ethan had scraped a tree at 12. She's okay, Caleb said softly. Kid didn't have time to mess her up. The interior smelled like dust and lemon oil, exactly like the last time Harold and I had slept out here during his chemo, when he couldn't make it up the stairs to our bedroom. The dinette cushions, the tiny kitchen, the framed photo of us at the Grand Canyon, all of it was still in place. Caleb latched the door behind us and knelt on the floor between the twin beds. 2 years ago, he said. Harold came in with a sheet of plywood and a grin like a kid, said he needed a favor. We pulled up this section of subfloor and built a hidden compartment between the joists. I told him it felt like something out of a spy movie. He just said, "Life's messier than movies, Caleb." He pressed his fingers under the edge of the vinyl and popped up a panel I'd never known was loose. Beneath it, nestled in the darkness between floor beams, was an old, blue cookie tin, mottled with rust, and a small black cassette recorder wrapped in a shop rag. "Marian," Caleb said, sitting back on his heels. "He told me if this trailer ever left your property without you driving it, I was to put this in your hands and get out of the way." I reached down. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the tin. "Do you want me to leave you alone?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I whispered. "Please, Caleb, thank you." He nodded and slipped out of the door, pulling it shut and leaving me alone in the dim, quiet space that had held so much of our life. For a long moment, I just sat on the floor with that cookie tin in my lap, listening to my own breath and the faint tick of the metal cooling. Then I pried the lid off. Inside lay a stack of folded papers, an old spiral-bound notebook with Silver Nest log written on the front in Harold's blocky scrawl, a small SD card taped to an index card, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Marian, in Harold's careful, heavy pen. I opened the letter first. "Marian, if you're reading this, I'm not there to explain it over coffee like I'd planned, and I'm sorry for that. You'd have wanted to be part of this from the beginning, but I needed to keep you out until I was sure of what I was seeing. This isn't about you not being strong enough. God knows you are. It's about me not wanting you anywhere near the blast zone until I had proof. Proof about Aubrey." I had to stop and press the pages flat. My hands were shaking that badly. The woman our boy married is not who she claims to be. Over the last 18 months, I've watched her do things that don't fit the story she tells. I've run her supposed schools and towns and jobs through every database an old mechanic can figure out. About 6 months in, I looped in Laura Rendell from the sheriff's office. She confirmed what I felt in my gut. Aubrey Neal is one of at least 3 names this woman has used. On the SD card taped to this letter, you'll find copies of what I've gathered, screenshots of old profiles, county records, marriage licenses from New Mexico and Texas under names that track with her face. The spiral notebook in this box has my notes. Dates, places, things she said about us, about the house, about you. There are 2 phone numbers on the back page. They belong to the families of her last 2 marks, Martha Hughes, up in Wyoming, and Roger Lane, down in Colorado. Their stories match each other too closely to be coincidence. Her pattern is simple and ugly. Find a man with an aging parent and a family asset, wedge herself between them, convince everyone the parent is slipping, then help them sell what's valuable and vanish with the proceeds. She will come for our house, Marian. She will come for you. That's the step she hasn't taken yet, and that's what I've been trying to get ahead of. I confronted her once, gently. Got a look I'll never forget, the kind grifters give when they realize you see through the shine. Ethan is blind to it right now. He loves her. He's stubborn. If we go at this half-cocked, she'll turn him against us and win before we have a chance to show him the truth. I need hard, cold evidence enough that even our boy can't argue with it. I was hoping to put this all in your lap myself once I had it nailed down, but my heart had other plans. If I'm gone, and you're reading this, please don't ignore it. Use the SD card. Call Martha. Call Roger. Talk to Laura. Protect yourself. Protect Ethan. He's a victim in this too, even if he doesn't see it. I've put other things in place to make sure you're all right financially. Don't let anyone convince you you're a burden or that you need to sign anything over to make their lives easier. I love you, Mare. I'm still looking out for you the only way I can. Harold. Tears blurred the ink until the words swam. I wiped my eyes with the heel of my hand and took a breath that shook all the way down. Harold, I whispered into the quiet Airstream. What have you been carrying all this time? I opened the spiral travel log. The first half was what I expected: mileage, campground names, little jokes about Ethan spilling chili on the bedspread in '09. Somewhere around the 3/4 mark, the tone shifted. The headings became dates with names and cities underneath. Met Aubrey claims Dallas roots, UT Austin grad, no records in alumni database. Dinner with Ethan and Aubrey. She asks about house title, about my will, plays it off as curiosity. Marked date. Call with Laura. Confirms possible match to Shannon Briggs' alias used in elder exploitation case under investigation 3 years ago. At the back, taped to the inside cover, were 2 note cards with phone numbers and cities written on them. Martha, H, Pine Ridge, Y, Roger L, Greeley, CO. My heart thudded in my chest. I picked up the SD card, turned it over in my fingers, then slid it into the slot on the little cassette recorder. Harold had probably picked it because he knew I trusted physical things. I hit play. His voice filled the tiny trailer, rougher and more tired than I remembered from his healthy years, but steady. Okay, Mare, he said. If you're hearing this, I didn't get to finish my side of this fight. So here's what I've got. For the next 20 minutes, he walked me through what he'd found: old driver's license photos pulled from online records that matched Aubrey's face down to the freckle on her left cheek under different names. Copies of county marriage licenses with her signature next to men I didn't know. Notes about a farm sold out from under a 70-year-old woman, a shop foreclosed on after a conveniently timed health scare. When the recorder clicked off, the silence rushed back in. I sat there, on the floor between the twin beds, cookie tin beside me, notebook open, and realized the man I'd buried 10 months ago had been fighting this woman with one hand while holding my hand with the other, trying not to worry me. You idiot, I whispered, not meaning it, pressing my palm to the floor. You stubborn, beautiful idiot. Then I took a breath, wiped my face, and did what Harold had asked. I started making calls. The number for Martha Hughes rang 4 times before a voice picked up, thin and wary. Hello? Miss Hughes? I said. My name is Marian Whitaker. My husband's name was Harold. He might have called you a few months ago? Silence, then a soft, broken sound that might have been a laugh. Harold, she said. The man with the trailer. I remember. He said if a woman married to his son ever called, I should tell her everything. I'm that woman, I said. My son's wife is named Aubrey. Sometimes she goes by Aubrey Neal. My husband thought she might once have been in your life under another name. Martha took a breath. I heard a clock ticking in the background. The faint murmur of a TV turned low. Her name was Shannon when she came to us, she said. Shannon Duarte. She met my Josh at a church fundraiser. Pretty, bright. Told him she'd grown up on a ranch. Said she loved the smell of hay. Josh fell like a tree. She told me the story in careful pieces, voice steady the way people get when they've told the same horror out loud enough times it becomes a script. How Shannon started pointing out how forgetful Martha was getting. How she left magazine articles about dementia on the coffee table, highlighted. How she would take Martha's arm a little too firmly at family events and tell people sweetly that Mom's not as steady as she used to be. How Josh, in his fear, signed papers to sell the Hughes ranch that had been in the family for 5 generations so his mother could have the best care at a memory facility Shannon found. How long after the sale did she leave? I asked quietly. 2 weeks, Martha said. Money was wired into an account she'd put both their names on. Next day it was empty. By the time the sheriff tracked anything down, the money had gone through so many hands we were never getting it back. Josh still thinks it was his fault. I tell him she's the one who burned down the house, but guilt doesn't listen to logic. I closed my eyes. I'm so sorry. Whatever she's telling your boy about you, Martha said, voice sharpening. Write down everything. Every odd comment. Every time she moves your pills or misplaces your keys. She starts small, honey. By the time they realize what hit 'em, the land's gone. I wrote down her words, my pen leaving dents in the paper. Next, I called Roger. He answered on the first ring. Lane's garage, he said automatically, then corrected himself. Sorry. Habit. This is Roger. I introduced myself. Explained how I'd gotten his number. Shannon Briggs, he said, when I mentioned Aubrey's aliases. I could hear him rubbing his face, the rasp of stubble against skin. Yeah. I figured she'd moved on to the next poor sap. He'd met her at his father's funeral, he told me. She drifted over after the graveside service, said she'd lost her dad too, knew what that kind of hole felt like. She brought casseroles, sat up with him while he sorted through his father's things, laughed at his jokes when nobody else did. She made me feel like I wasn't alone, he said. That's the hook. His dad had left him a small but steady auto shop in Greeley. Roger hadn't wanted to run it. Too many ghosts in that building, you know? So when Shannon started talking about selling, traveling, healing, it sounded like a way out. They sold the shop, $195,000. She was gone 3 days later, he said. Took the lot and ran it through more accounts than I can count. I tracked her to a condo in Phoenix once. By the time I got there, the place was empty. New tenant said she'd moved to Mexico for work. My grip tightened on the phone. Does your son have access to your house? Roger asked. To your paperwork? Not yet, I said slowly. But she's been asking where I keep things, talking about how big the place is for just me. I've found brochures for assisted living in the trash she didn't mean to drop. You still have time then, he said. Use it. We didn't. Don't let her turn your boy into the weapon she hits you with. After I hung up, I sat very still in my kitchen chair, pen poised over Harold's notebook. The pattern wasn't hypothetical anymore. It had faces, names, graves, and empty houses. Harold had been right. And this woman had already taken the first steps toward making me the next story someone told on the phone to a stranger. The only person I wanted to talk to next was dead. The second person would have to do. Detective Laura Rendell had been a deputy when Harold worked part-time as a reserve at the sheriff's office back in the day. He'd come home from winter night patrols with stories about her chasing calves off the highway or calming down drunk ranchers swinging at each other outside the bar. She'd been at his funeral, uniformed and quiet in the back row. I drove straight from my kitchen to the sheriff's office, Harold's cookie tin, travel log, and SD card in a tote bag on the passenger seat. The building was warm and smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Laura was behind her glass-fronted bullpen, reading a report. When she saw me, she stood up so fast her chair rolled back. Miss Whitaker, she said, coming around the desk. Marian, are you all right? No, I said honestly. But I'm here. And Harold left you in the middle of this mess, so I'm hoping you're as good as he said you were. Her mouth twitched. That sounds like him. Come on back. In her small office, with its map of the county and a picture of Harold at a department barbecue on the corkboard, I laid out what I had. The letter, the note cards with phone numbers, my notes from the calls to Martha and Roger. She plugged the SD card into her computer and started clicking through. About 10 minutes in, she let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned, she murmured. She is good. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. If he said this woman was dangerous, he meant it. What you've got here, she lifted the SD card, plus your notes and those victims? This ties things together. Her pattern matches what we see in elder financial exploitation cases all over the country. She pulled a legal pad toward her and started sketching an outline. Charm, isolation, undermining the elder's credibility, asset transfer, disappearance. Has she started talking to anyone about you? She asked. Neighbors, maybe? Church friends? I thought about the way Aubrey's voice would go just a little louder when she mentioned me at gatherings. Marian left the stove on last week. Poor thing. She got lost in Walmart the other day. I think the store's just too big for her now. Small, casual comments. Nothing that sounded like a report to a deputy. Everything that added up to a story if you weren't paying attention. She's been planting seeds, I said. Laura nodded. There it is. First stage. She builds a narrative about you being confused, fragile. That way, when she pushes for power of attorney or helps Ethan sell the house out from under you, everyone thinks she's doing you a favor. Can you stop her? I asked, sharper than I meant to. Can you arrest her now? Laura's expression shifted, a mix of empathy and frustration. Not yet, she said. Most of what we have so far is out of state. Those cases matter, and they'll help. But for us to put cuffs on her here, she has to take some action inside Montana jurisdiction, use Ethan's name for fraud, try to forge your signature, that kind of thing. Right now she's all smoke. So we have to wait until she hurts us, I said flatly. Then you can help. We don't have to sit on our hands, Laura said. We build your case ahead of her. We document every comment, every weird move. We talk to a prosecutor. The minute she crosses a line, we file fast and hard. And we make sure Ethan sees what she is with his own eyes. How? I asked. He's wrapped up in her. Laura leaned back. Your husband was working on that, she said. These victims? She tapped the note cards. They're not just for the file. They're for Ethan. He needs to hear their stories from their own mouths. Grifters like her are experts at saying, your mom is paranoid. They're not good at answering questions about why 3 other families tell the exact same story. I looked down at Harold's looping scrawl on the notebook page. Protect our son. He's a victim too. All right, I said. Tell me what to do. The plan, in theory, was simple. Play along, watch, write everything down. Let Aubrey think her performance was working, then put the truth in Ethan's hands and step back. In practice, it meant inviting my son and the woman trying to take everything from me over for dinner and pretending I still believed the girl who called me Marian with a smile that never quite warmed her eyes. They got back from their Caribbean cruise on a Tuesday, sunburnt in all the places Montana doesn't see much sun in January. I made pot roast the way Harold used to slow, with rosemary and garlic and apple crisp for dessert because Ethan loved it as a kid. I set the table with the chipped stoneware we used for normal nights. Not the good plates. This wasn't a holiday. This was a stakeout. They showed up at 6 on the dot. Ethan hugged me in the doorway, holding on tighter than he had the day he told me he'd sold Silver Nest. His tan made the dark circles under his eyes more obvious. Hey, Mom, he said, voice catching just a little. Smells amazing. Thanks, sweetheart, I said, smoothing his sleeve. Come in. Get warm. Aubrey swept in behind him, wrapped in wool and smelling like expensive sunscreen. Marian, she said brightly, pulling me into a brief, perfumed embrace. You look... Well, thank you, I said. Long flights aren't kind to anybody. We sat at the kitchen table under the old brass light fixture Harold had always meant to replace. Aubrey took the chair at Ethan's side without asking, one hand resting lightly on his knee under the table. The first 15 minutes were all about the cruise, the endless shrimp buffet, the networking dinners with influencers and brand reps, the cocktails with names more complicated than most of the medications I'd dispensed in the ICU. It was incredible, Aubrey said, eyes shining, fork slicing through the pot roast like she'd never eaten stew beef in her life. It really opened my eyes to what's possible for us. We work so hard, Ethan and me. We deserve some elevation, you know? HRs. She glanced around my kitchen when she said it, like the worn linoleum and cluttered fridge magnets were evidence in a case against my life choices. It's good to have things to look forward to, I said, keeping my tone even. It also made me think, she went on, more serious now. About you, Marian. About your safety out here. All this snow, all this space. What if something happens and nobody notices? There it was. We've talked about maybe helping you find somewhere more supported, she said. A nice independent living place in town. Activities. People your own age. She smiled like she was offering me a spa weekend. You wouldn't have to worry about the yard or the house or the barn. I'm managing fine, I said. This is my home. Ethan cleared his throat. We do worry about you, Mom, he said. You're out here by yourself. The stairs, the ice. If you fell. I've been out here by myself for 10 months, I said. Before that, I was here with your father for 35 years. I know how to salt a stare. Aubrey's smile didn't falter, but I saw the calculation flicker behind her eyes. First direct attempt, logged. After dinner, I brought coffee and apple crisp into the living room. Aubrey excused herself to find the bathroom. Down the hall, I said, nodding toward the first floor. Same place it's been since you started coming over. I know, she sing-songed, just reorienting. 10 minutes passed. Too long for a bathroom. I waited 5 more, then set my mug down and walked quietly down the hall. The bathroom door stood open. Empty. I heard a faint rustle above me. Harold's old office was at the top of the stairs. The door was half open, light pooling out into the hallway. I climbed slowly, the old treads creaking under my weight. She was standing at Harold's file cabinet when I reached the doorway, her back to me, one hand shoved into a drawer labeled House Papers, eyes scanning the tabs. Aubrey, I said. She spun so fast a folder slipped from her fingers, papers fanning across the carpet, old tax returns, an insurance policy. Oh, she laughed, breathless. I am so sorry, Marian. I was looking for the bathroom and got turned around. This house is like a maze. The bathroom is downstairs, I said. Same place it was last time you were here. She touched my arm, nails resting light on my sleeve. Right. I knew that. I saw the office and thought maybe you kept extra towels up here. Silly me. Too much wine with dinner. Of course, I said. I bent, gathered the papers, slid them back into their folder. When I straightened, she was watching me with that same bright, flat smile. We walked back down together. I didn't say another word about it. I didn't need to. I had eyes. I had a pen. That night, after they left with promises to help me research senior communities, I wrote it all down in Harold's notebook. The next morning, I called Ethan. Son, I said when he answered, I need to talk to you about something your father left behind. Just you, not you and Aubrey. Can you come by this afternoon? We don't keep secrets between us, Mom, he said cautiously. Aubrey and I, this is about your father, I said quietly. And about you. You can tell her after you hear it. But I need to start with my son. Silence, then a sigh. All right, 3 o'clock. I'll come alone. At 3, Ethan pulled into the driveway, looking like he'd slept about as much as I had since the sale. On the kitchen table between us lay Harold's letter, the notebook, and a manila folder where I'd printed copies of the most damning pieces from the SD card marriage licenses. Photos, the statements I'd typed up from Martha and Roger. Ethan sat, arms crossed tight over his chest. If this is about the trailer again. It's not, I said. This is about your wife, and about what your father spent the last 1.5 years of his life trying to stop. I slid Harold's letter across the table. Read this. He frowned, unfolded the pages, and started. As his eyes moved, the color drained from his face. Dad was investigating Aubrey, he said after a minute. For 18 months? He got Laura involved, I said. He found other families. He found records. He hid them in Silver Nest because he knew she never stepped foot in the barn. This is... Ethan shook his head hard, like he could fling the words out of his ears. This is ridiculous, Mom. Dad never liked her. He thought nobody was good enough for me. He was paranoid about everything. If he was paranoid about everything, sweetheart, how come every detail in that notebook lines up with public records in 3 different states? I opened the folder and spread out papers, marriage certificates, with Aubrey's face under different names, photos of her standing next to men I'd never seen, news clippings about properties sold. Look at the dates. Look at the pattern. This could be anyone, he said weakly. People look alike all the time. Call them, I said, sliding him the page with Martha's and Roger's numbers. Ask them about their wives. Ask them what happened after those women moved in. Ask them if their mothers still live in their homes. Ask them if their fathers still own their shops. He crumpled the paper in his fist. I'm not harassing strangers because you and Dad can't stand that I married someone you don't like. This isn't about I said. My voice was steady, the way it had been when I told families in the ICU that their loved one wasn't going to make it. This is about you being on a list you don't know you're on. It's about our house. It's about me. He stood up, chair scraping back. Why can't you just let me be happy? He demanded. Why do you always have to find something wrong? Because your father died trying to protect you, I said, my voice cracking just a little on the last word, and I am not going to pretend he imagined all of this to keep the peace. I'm sorry it hurts, Ethan. I really am. But I'd rather have you mad at me than watch you lose everything and smile politely about it. He stared at me for a heartbeat. Then he shoved his chair in and headed for the door. I'm not calling them, he said over his shoulder. I'm not playing along with this. Aubrey loves me. She's building a life with me. I'm not going to blow that up because you're scared of being alone. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the porch light. I sat at the table with Harold's letter under my hand and listened to my son's car start, back down the driveway, and disappear. Then I picked up the notebook and wrote, in shaking letters. Ethan saw the file. Denied. Left angry. Gave him the numbers anyway. The waiting after that was worse than any night shift I'd ever worked. The call came close to midnight. I'd been sitting in Harold's recliner with the TV muted, watching the snow swirl under the security light, unable to settle in bed, unable to do anything but exist in the tight, dark little pocket of fear that forms in a mother's chest when her child is out there and you can't fix whatever's happening to him. The phone buzzed against my thigh. Ethan's name glowed on the screen. Ethan, I said, answering on the first ring. Son? His voice was wrecked. Mom, he said, choked. I called them. I closed my eyes, exhaling. Martha and Roger? Well, doing all of them, he said. They told me everything. It was like they were reading my life back to me with different names. He sucked in a shaky breath. After I left your place, I was furious. I drove around for an hour, just looping. But I couldn't stop thinking about Dad's handwriting, those dates, those pictures. So you called? I said softly. I told myself I was going to prove you both wrong, he said. That I'd hear some weird story that didn't line up, and I'd come back and shove it in your faces. Instead, I heard my future if I don't get out. My throat tightened. I went home after, he went on. Aubrey was on the couch, watching some reality show. I asked her where she grew up. She laughed and said, You know this. I said, Tell me anyway. He took another breath. Mom, the town she named, the college, none of it matched what she told me when we were dating. She slipped. She mixed up her lies. When I asked about it, she got annoyed. Said I was being weird. What did you do? I asked. I asked about the credit cards, he said. The ones Laura told you about. The ones in my name. I said I wanted to see the statements. That I had a right to know how $28,000 got run up without me noticing. And she changed, he whispered. Her face, her voice, everything. She said they were business investments and I wouldn't understand. I asked what business. She told me to trust her. I said trust goes both ways. She called me ungrateful. Then she went to the bedroom, started shoving clothes into a suitcase. I could see it. I'd seen the same mask shifts in families where addiction had eaten through trust. I asked her if she was really planning to put you in a home and sell the house, he said. She stopped packing, looked at me like I was something under her shoe. Then she threw her phone at the wall. It shattered. She grabbed her passport, the emergency cash, some file folders I've never seen before, and walked out. She's running, I said. She's been ignoring my texts for an hour, he said. Her location sharing is off. I don't know what to do, Mom. I don't know who I married. You call Laura, I said. Right now. Then you come here. We do this together. By 1 a.m, my kitchen table had turned into a small war room. Ethan sat at one end, eyes red-rimmed, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he wasn't drinking. Laura sat at the other with her laptop open, Harold's SD card plugged in. She checked into a motel near Billings Airport an hour ago, Laura said, tapping the screen. Used a card in her Aubrey Neal name. She's made 3 cash withdrawals in the last 2 hours, bank lobbies and an ATM, all near the interstate. 12,000 pulled, give or take. So she's got at least 12 in cash plus whatever she has squirreled away, I said. Plus whatever she planned to squeeze out of your house if we hadn't cut this short, Laura said. She picked up her phone. I've already got a call in to a friend in the AG's office in Wyoming. We'll loop in Colorado first thing. We had an old warrant request on Shannon Briggs that stalled for lack of full ID. Harold's file plus what you've just seen gives us enough to revive it. She looked at Ethan. We can move now, but it means you're on the record. We'll need you to sign a statement about the cards in your name. Testify later if it goes to trial. Are you ready for that, Ethan? He stared at the table for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were cleared in a way I hadn't seen in months. What would Dad do? He asked. He'd drive you to the station himself, I said. He didn't spend his last year chasing her across the internet for revenge. He did it so she couldn't keep doing this to other families. Ethan nodded. Then we stop her, he said. Whatever it takes. Laura exhaled, some tension leaving her shoulders. Okay, she said. I'll call the airport detail. We need to be there before TSA opens their doors. 2-1. The drive to Billings in the dead of night felt like moving through the inside of a snow globe. The highway was mostly empty, just us and the odd semi, headlights carving tunnels through blowing drifts. Laura drove, eyes on the road, radio crackling occasionally with updates from dispatch. Ethan sat in the back seat, leaning forward between us, like that would make us get there faster. By the time we pulled into the airport lot, the eastern horizon was just starting to go from black to dark gray. Inside, the terminal was in that strange in-between state. Coffee shops rolling up their grates, janitors finishing their shifts, the first business travelers trudging toward security with briefcases and rolling bags. 2 plainclothes officers waited near the TSA checkpoint, one with a phone to his ear. Laura flashed her badge, handed over a printout, and nodded toward the entrance. That's our gate, she said. We tucked ourselves behind a wide pillar with a clear view of the security line and waited. At 5:30, she appeared. Aubrey, or Shannon, or whatever her name had been before she started collecting them, walked through the automatic doors pulling 2 matching suitcases, wearing a camel-colored coat and dark sunglasses despite the dim light. Her hair was perfect. Her expression was calm, almost bored, as if catching a pre-dawn flight was just another step in her self-care routine. She handed her ID and boarding pass to the TSA agent with a polite smile, collected them back, and moved into the line. Every few seconds, she checked her phone, thumb flicking over the screen. The plainclothes officers moved in sync, closing the distance like they'd rehearsed it. Ma'am? The taller one said, stepping up beside her. Can we speak with you for a moment? She blinked, that perfect smile flashing. Is there a problem, officer? He held up his badge. We have a warrant for your arrest. Shannon Briggs, also known as, I don't know who that is, she said lightly, voice only a notch higher than normal. My name is Aubrey Neal. Please step out of the line, ma'am, the other officer said, blocking her path forward. For half a second, she froze. Then she bolted, kicked off her heels, abandoned her suitcases, and sprinted down the side of the queue in stocking feet, eyes scanning for an opening. Airport security stepped in fast. One guard caught her around the waist as she tried to squeeze past the metal detectors. She twisted, scratched, screamed, "Get off me! I haven't done anything!" Phones came out everywhere. People stepped aside, recording. The officers took her down hard but controlled. Face turned away from the tile. One snapped cuffs on her wrists, while the other popped open her abandoned luggage. The first suitcase was boring, clothes rolled tight, a toiletry bag, a pair of sandals. The second was less boring. 10s, the officer said under his breath. 20s, 50s. Neat stacks of bills, rubber-banded, filled the bottom half of the suitcase like a cash drawer. Tucked into the lining was a passport with her face and a different name, plus a slim folder of documents, account numbers, a list of properties with little notes scrawled beside them, including Whitaker Old Farmhouse, paid off, good equity. Want to explain this? The officer asked, holding the second passport up where she could see it. She spat at him, and then she saw us. Ethan stood 10 yards away, pale under his tan, his fists clenched at his sides. I stood beside him, one hand on his arm. Aubrey went absolutely still. The mask broke. Rage boiled up under her skin like something alive. You, she hissed, struggling against the cuffs. You pathetic idiot. You did this. If 2-1. Ethan flinched like she'd hit him. You had one shot at a real life, and you blew it, she spat. Do you think anyone else is going to want you after this? You're nothing without me, Ethan. Nothing. I stepped half a pace in front of him. Not much, just enough that if she managed to lunge, she'd hit me first. Her eyes snapped to mine. And you, she snarled. You old woman. You're delusional. You should have stayed out of this and died quietly in that drafty barn. This, she jerked her chin toward the suitcase, the officers, the flashing lights, was mine. 3 years I spent on this town. 3 years setting this up. Laura moved in, nodding to the officers. They started to march Aubrey Shannon, whoever she was now, toward a side door. She kept shouting over her shoulder until the metal door swung shut behind her and cut off the sound. The quiet that followed felt almost obscene. You don't realize how loud one person is until the echo stops. Ethan's knees buckled slightly. I grabbed his hand. It's over, I said softly. She can't touch us anymore, son. He nodded, jaw trembling. I don't know how to feel, he whispered. However you need to, I said. We'll sort the rest out later. Sorting the rest out later turned out to look like a lot of fluorescent-lit rooms with uncomfortable chairs. 2 weeks after the arrest, we sat across from a county prosecutor in a conference room while Laura and an assistant U.S. attorney walked through charges like they were reading a grocery list. Elder financial exploitation under Montana statute. Identity theft, wire fraud. Probable cause to connect her to at least 4 prior cases in Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. With your son's cooperation, we can add credit card fraud. Ethan signed statement after statement. I watched his hand tremble on the page when he wrote his name under the part that said he had never authorized the cards Aubrey had opened. The FBI got involved when they realized how many state lines she'd crossed. At some point, someone in a suit used the words pattern of predatory conduct and serial offender. It was a strange thing, hearing the woman who'd sat at my table eating pot roast described as a serial offender. In the end, they offered her a plea deal. 10 to 12 years in federal prison, Laura told us over coffee one afternoon. Given her age and record, she'll probably serve most of it. With what we've given the victims in the other states, they'll be able to pursue some restitution too. What about Ethan's debts? I asked. Most of it will be forgiven, she said. The banks would rather write off fraudulent charges than explain why they didn't catch the pattern sooner. The marriage? Void, Ethan said from his corner seat. County judge signed it last week. Turns out it's hard to be legally married under a name you stole. He tried to make it sound like a joke. It didn't quite land. He moved back home the same day the annulment papers came through. Just for a while, he said, standing on the porch with 2 suitcases that looked an awful lot like the ones Aubrey had dropped on the airport floor. Until I get my head on straight. Of course, I said, holding the door open. Your room's still upstairs, posters and all. The room looked frozen in time, faded Broncos pennant on the wall, medals from high school track, a stack of old video game cases. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, then stepped inside and set his bags down, like putting something gently back where it belonged. He started therapy on Laura's strong recommendation. Twice a week, he drove into town and sat with a woman named Dr. King, who asked questions that left him quieter but somehow clearer when he came home. Some days, he came down for breakfast, made eggs, cracked a joke about my coffee, helped me haul wood to the stove. Some days, I heard his footsteps only once or twice and let him have the space. Healing, I knew from years of watching patients, isn't a straight line. It loops and doubles back. It looks like someone functioning fine on Tuesday and staring at the wall on Wednesday. My job was what it had been since the day I'd brought him home from the hospital. Keep him fed, keep the lights on, keep a place open at the table. On a Tuesday in March, the prosecutor called to say the plea was signed. She pled to the Montana charges and agreed to accept responsibility for the others as part of the package, he said. 10 years, no parole for at least 8. She'll be in a federal facility where she can't do this to anyone else. I hung up and found Ethan in the barn, sitting on Harold's old stool, the travel log open in his lap. She took it, I said. 10 years, maybe more. 2. Our topped of better. He nodded. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. Good, he said. I don't want anyone else to get one of her casseroles. We sat there in the smell of oil and dust and old metal for a while, just breathing. I sold his trailer, he said suddenly, raw, his pride and joy. For $4,000. For a trip with a woman who was planning to put you in a home and take everything. How do I ever come back from that, Mom? You come back one day at a time, I said. You tell the truth. You sign statements. You sit in therapy and say out loud the things you'd rather forget. You helped me keep this place standing, and you remember that your father knew who she was and still called you a victim in his notes, not an accomplice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Harold's letter, the part he'd written just about Ethan. I'd been carrying it for weeks, waiting. Read this, honey, I said. He wrote it for you. Ethan took it, hands shaking slightly, and read. He read Harold's lines about loving him, about not wanting to break his heart without proof, about understanding how charm works on thirsty people, about how none of this was his fault and all of it hurt anyway. When he finished, he folded over, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. The sobs that came out were deep and ugly and necessary. I put my hand on his back and sat with him while the storm moved through. We stayed that way until the light outside shifted from blue to gold. There was one more loose end Harold had left that needed tying. It came in the form of a rumbling diesel and a familiar silhouette in the driveway one Saturday morning. I was at the sink watching the snow melt into rivulets off the roof when I heard that deep, throaty growl of a truck with something heavy behind it. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stepped onto the porch. Caleb's old Ford sat in the drive, hooked to a gleaming silver trailer. Silver Nest, number 07. I gripped the railing, heart pounding. Ethan opened the front door behind me, drawn by the noise. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Mom?" Caleb climbed out of the cab, his face split by a grin. "Morning, Miss Whitaker," he called. "Thought it was time this lady came home." "You bought it," I said, stepping down off the porch. "You paid Ethan, and your husband co-signed my dreams," he said. "Way I figure it, Harold wouldn't want me profiting off his Airstream. I held on to it to keep it safe. Now that the mess is settling, it belongs where he always meant it to be." He walked over, a ring of keys jangling in his hand. "He told me once Silver Nest wasn't really his," he said, placing the keys in my palm. "Said it was for you, for when he couldn't be behind the wheel anymore." Ethan stood a few steps back, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes suspiciously shiny. "I don't deserve this," he said hoarsely. "I'm the one who—" "You were lied to," Caleb said simply. "There's enough blame in this story to go around without you trying to hog it all, kid." He clapped Ethan on the shoulder and nodded toward the barn. "Let's get her tucked in." We opened the big metal door together. The empty rectangle in the center of the floor seemed to lean forward, waiting. Caleb backed the Airstream in slow and sure, easing her into the space she'd left months ago. When he cut the engine, the barn went quiet in that thick way old buildings do when they're holding their breath. Then everything relaxed me. Ethan. The air itself as the trailer settled, tires back in their worn grooves. It smelled right again. Aluminum, old wood, a hint of the lemon oil Harold liked. "He'd be proud of you both," Caleb said after we'd unhooked her. "Of you for stopping her, Marian. And of you, Ethan, for turning around before she drove you right over a cliff." After he left, after we'd fed him coffee and pie and accepted his hug, we stood in the barn doorway, looking at Silver Nest. "I never thought I'd see her again," Ethan said quietly. "Me neither," I said. He rested his hand on the polished aluminum, fingers tracing a rivet line. "I remember helping Dad sand this seam," he said. I whined the whole time. My arms hurt. He just kept humming that stupid old song and telling me to keep going. A small smile tugged at his mouth. It was the first time I'd seen that smile without strain behind it in months. "Maybe we should finish what he started," I said. "Not for her. For us." He nodded. "Yeah," he said. "For us." We didn't take Silver Nest out right away. First, we opened her up. One Sunday morning in April, with the snow mostly gone from the fields and the creek starting to run fast, we propped the Airstream's door open and aired everything out. We spread Harold's travel log on the little dinette table, flipped to the back half where the notes shifted from Titan cabinet hinge to documenting Aubrey patterns. The last page before the investigation section held something else. In smaller writing, tucked into the corner, "Teach Marian to tow this thing. She underestimates herself. Show Ethan how to grease the bearings again. Write down everything so they can do it without me." "You hear that?" I said, tapping the line and looking at Ethan. "We've got homework." "I weigh." He squeezed my shoulder. "Yes, ma'am." We spent that day and the next checking every system: water, propane, electrical, cross-referencing Harold's notes with YouTube videos when we weren't sure. Ethan ran grease into the wheel bearings the way Harold had taught him at 16. I cleaned out cabinets and found little reminders, 2 old park passes, a folded grocery list in Harold's handwriting, a coin from a vending machine in Utah. At dusk, when we were both tired and smelling like cleaner and axle grease, we sat on the small steps and watched the sky go pink over the pasture. "You know what I miss the most?" Ethan said quietly. "What's that, son?" "Tana. Those long drives when Dad would just talk about nothing for hours," he said. "Road signs, weird billboards, old songs on the radio. It was boring and perfect. I didn't know it was the good stuff until it was gone." "We can make more boring and perfect," I said. "Just because he's not behind the wheel doesn't mean the road disappeared." He nodded, blinking hard. 4 months after Caleb brought Silvernest home, I decided it was time to do the thing Harold had written down and never gotten to cross off. I was 62 years old. I'd driven a pickup on ice and mountain passes my whole life. I'd managed critical care for 4 decades, buried a husband, survived a con artist. I could learn to tow a trailer. On a clear Saturday morning in May, Ethan stood beside the hitch with the travel log open. "All right, Mom," he said, a grin just visible at the edges now. "Step 1, back the truck up slow. Watch the mirror. I'll guide you." We went through each piece of Harold's checklist. Hitch locked, chains crossed, lights tested, brakes set. My hands were steadier than I expected when I climbed into the driver's seat. "You sure you're up for this?" Ethan asked, half teasing, half serious, leaning in the open window. "You doubting me, son?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Get in. You're not talking me out of this now." He laughed and walked around to the passenger side. I eased the truck and trailer out of the barn, across the yard, and onto the gravel drive. The Airstream glowed in the mirrors like a silver promise. The first few miles were nerve-wracking. Every little sway felt like a potential disaster. But as we got onto Route 89 and the road opened up, my shoulders dropped. The rig hummed behind us, like it had always belonged there. We drove past hayfields and sagebrush, past the old Whitman place where Harold had once fixed a tractor, past the turnout where he and I had watched a thunderstorm roll in on our 20th anniversary. The sky was high and blue, the air crisp. Somewhere between Red Creek and the next town, Ethan rolled down his window, stuck his hand out, and let it ride the wind. "Dad would be losing his mind right now," he said over the rush of air. "In a good way." "Yeah," I said. "He would." We drove with no particular destination, just following the curve of the river and the shape of the hills, letting the miles do their quiet work. After an hour, we found a pull-off with a view of snow still clinging to the far peaks. I eased the truck and trailer onto the shoulder, heart pounding a little with the effort of parking straight. We sat there in the cab for a moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. "You did it, Mom," Ethan said finally. "You towed his dream." "Our dream," I corrected. He smiled, the real kind that reached his eyes this time. On the way home, with the late afternoon light turning everything gold, I realized that the tightness in my chest I'd been living with since the day I found the barn door open had finally loosened. Not gone. Grief doesn't go. It just stops strangling you. The barn looked different, with Silvernest back inside, Harold's tools on their hooks, Ethan's muddy boot prints on the floor, and my truck parked where his had once been. The house felt different too, still old, still drafty, but full again. Not the same kind of full it had been when Harold slept beside me and snored in that annoying way. A new, full, quieter, but solid. That night, after Ethan went upstairs, I stood at the kitchen sink in the dark and looked out at the barn. I thought about Harold's letter, about the cookie tin, about Martha and Roger getting checks from a woman in Montana who knew she could never give them back their homes, but wanted to put something in their hands anyway. I'd done that a month earlier, wiring each of them $10,000 from the CD Harold had set up years ago and never bragged about. "For your mother's memory," I'd written to Martha, from someone who almost took the same fall. "It's prize." "For your father's shop," I'd written to Roger, from a woman whose husband never stopped being a mechanic, even in hospice. I thought about Ethan asleep in his old room, therapy appointments on his calendar. "Call Mom," set as a daily reminder on his phone like I might disappear if he didn't. I thought about Caleb closing up his shop for the night, turning off the lights on a row of shining trailers that existed because Harold had co-signed a note instead of turning away. And I thought about all the women sitting in houses like mine, wondering if they were crazy for feeling the floor shift under them when someone smiled too sweetly and rearranged their pills. Harold had left me proof and people. Laura had added law and muscle. Ethan had added something to humility, the willingness to say I was wrong and stand in a courtroom anyway. Together, somehow, we'd taken one con artist off the road and gotten our Airstream back where it belonged. So that's my story. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear what you think. Would you have been able to forgive your child for selling something that precious your husband's second heart without asking you? Tell me in the comments, and if you believe that even in your 60s you can still fight back, protect what matters, and start new chapters on old roads, hit subscribe to Never Too Old. We've got more miles to cover.